Well, welcome everybody to the latest edition of the ICG webinar series. A particularly apposite title this time, with strategies for coming out of lockdown. And as usual, if you look around the room and the people in front of you, you'll see there is plenty of experience. This is being recorded. It's being streamed on Facebook as well. So if for any reason you can't stay for the full length, then please do make sure you have a look at the recording later. I'm not going to bother introducing the guys who are here because you will have read about the webinar when you came on. So let's not waste that time. Some of the faces you'll recognize already. And the one thing I would say about these webinars is what always happens is that the questions build up towards the end. So please, if you have a question, and we have got some questions already here, so I'll start with some of those straight away in a moment. Please get your questions in now, and we can see those. And Ben Sellers, who's, well, he's sitting below me here, I don't know where he is for you, will be interrupting me with some information about what's going on and questions coming in on Facebook. But back to the matter is, we have a highly unusual situation at the moment. Most of you will be wondering what you're going to do next. Completely get that. Last week, May the 13th, obviously was a great day for UK Property PLC, and that things opened up again. But the point is they're opening, they haven't opened. We haven't gone straight back to normal, and no one knows exactly what's going to happen. Plenty of the people here have experience of black swan events, world-altering situations. I'm embarrassed to tell you that I myself I came into estate agents at the end of the first oil shock in the 70s. That gives you some idea of how old I am. And dealing with those situations has taken quite a lot of balls from time to time, because we haven't known what was going to happen after them. And this is obviously another one of those events. So the people that are here, questions like about furlough, at the end of June, furlough will end with the existing situation, or pardon me, end of July. And a lot of people will have to start paying their workers again. Are they going to want to? You've got a situation where, yes, sure, there's lots of pent-up demand. Gary Barker from Repit was talking about some figures in a call to me yesterday, where he was talking about last week, the first 3 days after the lockdown was lifted in the property industry. He was talking about valuations. This is new valuations already being up to a third of pre-COVID levels. He was talking about new instructions, and these are new instructions, not things that are postponed for any reason, or they've been put on and then taken off and put back on again. 2/3 of the levels of pre-COVID levels, and the highest number of applicants ever in their history. This is Repit, who represent a large chunk of the industry via their CRMs. So this is interesting, but is that demand going to carry on? And if we get to the end of July and into August and that pent-up demand falls away a little bit, are you going to want to take your staff back? What is the strategy, do we think? So I'm just going to start while the audience is building, and there are plenty of people here already, but let's just go around the room a little bit. I know Peter Rollings, as in, has some fairly strident views about this sort of thing. So let's kick the ball off with Peter and see what you think, Peter.
Well, I mean, I think I'm amazed how cautious people are being. I am in the camp of it's on the way down the mountain. Let's get on with it. I was amazed at a poll I saw this morning that 76% of respondents thought Countrywide were right in very slowly opening their offices. I saw this in January 2009, 3 months after Lehman's went down, that the market where I was absolutely kicked off, and lots of people were slow in jumping on that. And I think we need to. I think our industry is a very simple industry to socially distance. I think it's remarkably simple, and I think one just has to give it some thought. But I would be very, very much of the opinion that we should get on with it. Start showing houses with common sense. You've seen the record number of applicants entering the market. I think you're doing yourselves a massive disservice if you pussyfoot around and try and keep everyone happy all the time, is my view.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think that's probably a fair and tough right-wing view of exactly what's happening. I think what seems to me to be the case from the
common sense, frankly.
Well, I agree. I think common sense is what it's all about. But I think the difference between old older agents and younger agents can be quite significant. I think a lot of the older agents have a slightly different view. Let's come to someone who supposedly is slightly younger. Kai, what's happening over there at Keaton's?
Yeah, certainly from a lead perspective, it's probably taken us a little bit off guard. We are back to sort of 90% of this seasonal time lead volume, particularly for lettings over sales. So there's no question there's a significant demand from that context. It's now sort of managing the staff aspect into getting up to speed, particularly with lettings as well, where you've got the viewing aspect to commence and you've got tenants that are involved in the property but don't have a vested interest in showing. So there clearly is a blocker in the activity level being controlled by what you can do there. But the demand is unquestionably coming through thick and fast.
So can I just ask you though, are you planning on bringing everybody back from furlough straight away? Where are you in terms of your levels, your staffing levels now compared to where you were pre-COVID?
We're about 25% in terms of the front end aspect. Administration and support are all working from home and have been throughout the process. But I suspect over the next 2 to 3 weeks that will be ramped up fairly quickly if that demand continues.
Yeah. Mark, down there in Dorset, what's happening with you?
I think the best way to explain it is a bit like Josh Spigen predicted, actually. He imagined this COVID-19 was almost like a pace car putting on the front of all estate agents, and it just feels like the pace car's left and there's just massive traction. I do agree with Peter. There's a massive amount of work to be done, to be quite honest. A lot of it's on the very front end of the business. Our pipelines are almost through, so we'll probably have record exchanges for the next couple of months, and then we'll have nothing in the bank. So we're just putting everything we can in that front end and trying to create massive action in the database just to get everything turning. And we're finding, because we're down in Dorset, we're finding a great deal of people moving from out the area. When we last checked, there was 70% of our applicants were from somewhere else moving into our area. That's normally around 40%. So it may be that the habits of people may be changing. We've opened up three sort of market appraisal systems which people can choose from, and we started viewings today, and we've been very busy. So hopefully it just increase.
And in terms of your staffing levels, Mark, are you back up in terms of furlough? Have you got everybody back? Are you same as Kai? Are you 25%? Where are you?
I'm probably I'm 50%, I think. So I'm probably a bit more optimistic than Kai, or at least I believe that digging deeper into the database to get the wheels turning, I think we can convince people to move. Now's the time. And I think if some negativity creeps into the press in a couple of months' time, now's the time, really. So we're sort of looking at maybe unfurloughing a lister, another lister, and perhaps another lister, one lister next week and another one the week after, depending on how much outcome. We've actually booked in 16 market appraisals this week, which is exactly where we would be on a normal week in this particular office that I'm sat in here today.
Okay, well, I suppose it is worth remembering that it's a fairly busy time. One person who's very well plugged into lots and lots of agents is you, Ian. In terms of what you're seeing and hearing, how are you finding that the people that you're consulting with and talking to, how are they reacting?
I think in most cases it's get on with it. I think they've been relieved to be able to get back to some form of work, being able to be productive. I understand there's this balance between the politically correct version of events and simply getting on with it. I think you made reference there perhaps being an age divide, but I think in reality, if you want to be, or certainly the clients that are wanting to get on with it are taking market share. So I think you have to make a decision on whether you want to be politically correct, if that's the right term, or whether you actually just want to get on with it. And as long as you observe sensible protocols around safety and who you're bringing into the work and who you've got in the business at any given time. I mean, I don't think any of my clients have unfurloughed everybody. There are some that never furloughed anybody. They never put anybody on furlough at all. And those that did have got some in the offices and some working from home, but they are actively promoting themselves to be able to sell, let, do mortgage appointments, show people around properties, seek buyers. I mean, one agent down on the South Coast, one office, put together 15 deals over the weekend. Now, some of those were a little bit stockpiled. 3 or 4 of them were deals that were really from 2 or 3 weeks ago, but the rest were fresh inquiries that were worked through. And I think only 4 or 5 of them were actually from real viewings. That they were deals done off of the back of they have to be from a real viewing. So I'm that's a long version of what Peter said. Get on with it. Well, grab what's there.
I mean, it's interesting that I was having a conversation with a large business owner yesterday, and he was talking to me about face masks, PPE, etc., which is obviously a big part of what people are worried about, because it's a significant expense. If every time you're going to go out, you've got to have new gloves, new masks, whatever it is you feel you need to do, wipes for the surfaces, etc. And I said to him, well, what's your shopping experience like? And actually, he said he'd been into Sainsbury's yesterday morning, and this is in London, and he was the only person wearing a face mask. He said it was quite busy, people were social distancing, but nobody else. And I'm not sure whether there's a British reaction or whatever it is, but I think there's going to be the politically correct reaction now, and that'll be watered down over the next couple of weeks. So I just think be common sense. I think Peter and 1 or 2 others have referred to it. Just use your common sense. I'll come to some of the questions which we got on the panel, but I think we've got some interesting people here who can answer a couple of questions. I mean, Richard Megson down there at the bottom, you're very much part of the sort of sales progression. How are you finding things happening? Are things happening at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, very much. I mean, the last sort of 4 or 5 days, we've seen an increase in our numbers across the board. So I'm very much with Peter. I don't want to be accused of being right wing, but my cup is very half full. And I do think we can be cautiously optimistic. I mean, one thing I would say is, now I've got a lot of faith in the estate agency market. I wouldn't say otherwise, but I think over the last sort of 2 or 3 months, we've seen some fairly sort of ingenious moves by suppliers, by agents. There are solutions out there. I think it would be disappointing if agents went back to where they were. I think they need to embrace new technology, new solutions. But I think moving forward, certainly from our point of view, we've now brought the majority of our staff back. So, I'm pretty bullish about the prospects, and I agree with Ian and Peter. Let's just get on with it.
Yeah, I think one can get on with the common sense. 3 last people we haven't spoken to before we dive in, who've got some real experience in the market. And Peter Knight, before we were on air, you were talking about one of your webinars you've done about a month ago, where you had a macroeconomist talking about the future. But I think there's plenty to be positive about.
Yeah, he's actually a behavioural economist. So he bases his findings at Roger Martin Fagg, and in fact we've got him coming back this week for another webinar. And I've seen his slide deck for this week's presentation, and he's extremely encouraged. And his reporting is based on his observations of people's behaviours, as opposed to just the economic data itself. And he's of the opinion that actually we're in a much better place economically than many of the forecasters would have us believe. He offered the idea that actually, obviously it's sad for any individual, but the vast majority of people who've been made unemployed are actually younger people who aren't homeowners themselves, many of them living at home with mum and dad. He also made the point that an awful lot of people who have been furloughed have been earning 80% of their money, but they've been able to defer their mortgage for 3 months, and they've had nothing actually to spend it on because they've not been able to go out. And so the current accounts for a lot of people are in a healthy situation. And the same is true of businesses as well, who have been conserving cash. And he believes that the behaviours typical of people following a situation like this is that they will go out and spend. So his suggestion is that we are going to have problems, not just estate agency, but as an economy, in terms of getting numbers of people. He predicts a staff shortage issue in 2021, a people shortage issue, and our real challenge is going to be competition for talent. So that's that is very encouraging, Ed. And I've known this guy 25 years, and he's called the last 3 general elections absolutely on the money. He called the Trump election 3 months prior, and everyone said he was mad. There was no way that was going to happen. Well, he proved them wrong. So I have faith in Roger, and Roger tells me it's all going to be good. So that's where my money's going.
Well, I think that's a good positive message. Well, it's not. It's positive from a home owning perspective. I mean, obviously this is going to be very difficult for a lot of young people, as you say. I mean, my stepson is one of them. He's been at home here. He was made redundant before lockdown happened, and it's been a pretty depressing 8 weeks for him. And not only that, but now going out to apply for jobs again can be pretty depressing if you're a young person, because everyone's in the same boat. But Jamie, you're up in the top left of my screen. Again,
Hello.
You're somebody with plenty of experience talking to agents. I mean, what do you think? I mean, in terms of, there's always a balance in there between business and looking after your staff. Where do you think that balance is, and how would you call that?
Looking at our own business rather than our network, we've been really open with everyone, and I see massive opportunity within this. Just before the turn of last year, we almost signed a lease for a 45,000 square foot business premises, which we didn't sign. And I'm thankful that we didn't, because what this has proven to me is that we can work very differently, and we can take advantage of the learnings from this exercise to have a different approach to the working week and the working location. You know, we can broaden our reach in terms of where we work, where we recruit from now, which is quite exciting. But we've been very open and honest and said the office will be ready by the 1st of June to work from there if you choose to. But if you're happy working from home and you've got the tech and the kit and the tech, then crack on. It's about trusting the people that work with you and work for you to push towards the end goal. So I see lots of exciting things that will come from this exercise.
I mean, I'd be interested to hear whether any of the agents here, or necessarily listening, who could send in their comments, whether they would trust people to work from home. I mean, you know, I'm old enough to still look at working from, or to have been the perception of working from home as being, you're going to put your feet up and watch the test match, and not.
It's about what you can measure and what you can manage. So I mean, very fortunately, we're an outsourced provider. So we work with 2,500 branches all across the UK, working as an extension of their firm. But we can manage and view call times, answer rates, actions, tasks, all those various things. And actually what we saw, because we locked down and went to home working 2 weeks before lockdown, people's activity was higher than it would have been in the office. They were more effective from home. We were doing deals at 7:30 at night on a Friday night because we had empowered the people to have the ability to do that from home. And you know, it's extended the reach of what we can do.
Well, I think that's one of the most important comments, one of the most important things people want to think about. I saw Mark and Ian have their hands up, but Ben, you were in the middle there. Have you got something you want to add?
Well, I just thought there's a question that I think this might be partially, the answer might be this, but obviously Starberry, we embraced this in 2001. We've got 90 people that work remotely, and I can 100% say that we've never been so efficient ever since we left our offices. Obviously it works for some, doesn't work for others, but I think technology and general trust, if people are really engaged and empowered to deliver on behalf of their brands, they're going to do this for you, and you're not going to have to worry. If anything, they worry about overworking.
Yeah, it's the work-life balance piece. We all had that fear that, you know, we joke that we watching Homes Under the Hammer, but if you can do the work and, you know, in between put a wash on or hang a wash out, or, you know, put some tea in the oven, you know, these things there's a balance that we can learn from this, which is quite exciting.
No, it's got to make sense, and I'm sure that the fact that we've all been to some extent bored of going from one Zoom call to the next has proven how effective they can be and how well the business can be managed. Raj, you had your hand up there.
Mute myself, sorry for that. So while working from home is becoming a broader concept and a more accepted long-term approach, I think there are 3 areas that nobody's quite nailed yet. And so within each business, it's how do you build and maintain culture? How do you enhance and support collaboration? And how do you enhance, I'm going to call it camaraderie, so I've got a third C, but it's basically teamship. And nobody's really nailed that via electronic means. I think the sort of 2D human experience that Zoom provides is great in terms of communication, but it doesn't necessarily lead to the collaboration, not least because the non-verbal cues are much harder to pick up on through a Zoom or a team meeting. So I think there is still a gap where technology doesn't currently fill, and we as a business are looking at how we overcome that whilst those social distancing remains in place. I think once social distancing drops away, there'll be more opportunity to build those outside of an office environment, but at the moment there's still gaps that I see in the working world.
Yeah, I think that hive learning miss is quite a big point. I really do. I think that's me. Mark, you look very determined.
Yeah, I'm excited about this because I, by necessity, had to open a home-based estate agency in 2011. I didn't have any choice because I couldn't afford to open an office, and I never actually went back to having any high street office, which I'd worked in even underneath Peter way back in the 90s, and that's Peter Rollins. And so our network is all home-based agents, and they wouldn't take an office. We've talked about, some people in our network have talked about taking up an office. They will not take up an office, they just won't do it. And I totally agree with Jamie, your range is so much wider. You know, if you can get more applicants in that funnel, then you can get more sales out the funnel. And we were selling a house a day from home without a team sat next to us, and we will never go back, and there's just no way back. And we do have one hub area which we do all our training, and I agree with Raj, you do need a central location where people can come together. And I can remember speaking to Peter Knight about your training centre, Peter, where there is a place where people can unite, and there is a cultural piece which people has to copy. But there is a great deal of energy in this system, and offices I see them as interruption factories where people just get interrupted all day. And I totally agree that you can get so much more done when people are focused and they've got the right energy and culture.
Thank you, Mark. I think that's a question that people have to come to terms with one-on-one. I mean, obviously we're getting some questions now coming in from the people who are actually listening. So let's try and get some of those answered. I mean, Graham Edwards here, it seems to me that the smaller independent 1 to 2 branch agents who are not opening are the ones who are not opening up immediately. What do you think they're fearing, and what practical advice would you give them? And I'd like to come back to Peter Rollins for that, really. I mean, what do you? I suspect I know what you're going to say, but you know, for the smaller companies who perhaps have more to lose, what would you say to them?
Well, obviously you have to do what you think's best, but I think it may be that their staff are perhaps older. But frankly, if you're under 40 and in good health, you've probably got more chance of being run over crossing the road to get to your office than actually catching this and it being seriously affecting you. So I do think, I would guess that poll I talked about this morning would be the vast majority of people who answered, be cautious, are employees. I think if you're an employer, you have to defend your baby. You have to fight for your business and your livelihood. And in order to do that, you've got to make some tough decisions. And this is a tough decision. I'm certainly not saying it's black and white, but I'm saying as a business owner, if you're not open at the moment, I think you're being far too cautious, and you're wound up in what's been going on at the moment, which is to make everyone terrified of going out and breathing air. And I think you need to sort of wake up and see why you're in business, because if you're not in business to open up and give evidently what people are wanting now, which is product and viewings, then you shouldn't be in the business.
Yeah, I mean, Peter Knight, you're familiar with providing strategies for the smaller people like that, as Graham's just asked. What would you say to him?
So I've got 3 suggestions, and they're in an order. I know some people might roll their eyes at this, but when I first heard it, I did. Having a slogan. One of our members said they're going to develop a slogan. They call it safety first. So what they mean by that is they're looking at everything: the viewing process, the market appraisal process, the check-in process, the inventory process, and asking the question, safety first. And some years ago, I ran a training program and developed the idea of treating every customer as if she was your grandmother. And therefore, my test is very simple. If this was your grandmother's property, how would you feel about it? If this was your grandmother going on a viewing, how would you feel about it? And if it passes that test, then fine. But I think treat every customer as if she's your grandmother. The second thing is control. And I think we've got a fantastic opportunity now to take back control. Ed, Peter and I, we're old enough to know what the market was like back in the day when we had control, when the agent was absolutely in control of the market. We've lost control. We now have the opportunity to take some of that control back. We have the opportunity to make sure that every buyer and every tenant is properly vetted before they're even allowed to view a property. We have the opportunity to make sure that we're investing our time and energy and effort with the right people, and that they comply with our processes and systems. And whilst I agree with you that common sense should prevail, I'm afraid common sense isn't common practice, if only it was. And therefore my concern is that actually what you'll find, if you don't determine what the rules are of the way that you operate as a business and leave it to individuals' interpretation, you will have potentially all sorts of incidents around. So I think we've got to really take control. This is how we do things around here. And the third thing is focus. We are going to have limited resources as a consequence of not just furloughing, but also you've got the issue of childcare, which is a massive problem for a lot of people. They want to come back to work, but they can't come back to work because they've got kids at home. And it looks like the schools are just delaying opening up. So that being the case, what we have to make sure we're doing is focusing on the right things. So I'd be asking every single applicant, buyer, tenant, and for that matter, seller and landlord. And I'd be asking them, so what would be the consequences if you didn't move right now? And if you get a response that is, well, it'd be inconvenient or not ideal or, whatever, well then, quite frankly, they're not motivated enough. If you get a response which is, that is just not an option, I have to move, we have to sell, we have to let, we have to move in, then those are the people that I'd be focusing my energy on. So safety first, absolutely. Treat every customer as if she's a grandmother. Take control. This is how it's going to work. These are the processes. This is how we're going to do a viewing. This is how we're going to go about it. And thirdly, focus on those people who are properly motivated and truly want to move and pick up the others in time when the time comes around.
Okay, well, thanks for that, Peter. That's sage advice, I'm sure, and practical for people. I mean, Ian, when we were talking before, just as all this was starting, it was definitely something which was talked about, that perhaps a number of agents would have maybe less but better qualified staff, and they'd be thinking about outsourcing and using different pieces of technology. Do you still subscribe to that view, given the number of people you're talking to? Do you still think that's going to be a viable course of action for some people?
Oh, it's definitely happening. There is no doubt that we are seeing a movement towards better qualified, better coached people. There are certain bands that are within the hierarchy of a normal estate agency that are probably finding themselves a little bit irrelevant right now. But I just want to reiterate what Peter said, that we have an opportunity to take back control of the marketplace. It's really important that the people that are watching this, that's how you do that, whether it's through outsourcing technology, better people, better trained people, combination of all the above, better processes. We can do during the day what it is we need to do in order to make a profitable but exceptional customer service business. And that control is crucial. We've been given a really big opportunity to be more, to vet people a little bit more firmly before we spend our time doing all these things with them. And I think that's really crucial to an estate agent. Whether or not you open up an office or work from a first floor office, whether you've got a shop, not a shop, I think flexibility in the workforce is going to be crucial. I think allowing people a decision on, how often they're in the office, how often they're working from home. I think those type of flexibilities will allow you to attract the best in class. I don't think the battleground is employed, self-employed, high street, not high street. I think it's about having sort of incredible flexibility in how we work with people, but employing people have the ability to take back control of their time and value their time properly by vetting, if vetting is the right word. But yes, we are definitely seeing a move towards outsourcing. We're definitely seeing a move towards the demand for training programs is off the scale high. So I can only assume people are realizing that they need to have very, very good performing people, and they absolutely need to change their systems and processes to fit with whatever's going to come out.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people at the moment are looking at all sorts of different models. You mentioned self-employed. I mean, there's been a lot of publicity and a lot of activity on social media with some of these people saying this is the best thing to do, etc., etc. There are so many different things for people to consider. We'll come on to that in a minute, but I want to get back to the questions we're being asked here. Chris Manderson, he said, from communications I've had with agents, there is serious concern that having a gung-ho approach, then the unfortunate possibility of a second COVID wave, the public perception of agents could be damaged significantly. Do you just suggest that agents take this on the chin? You know, Kai, you always strike me as someone who's never been backward in coming forward. What would you think about that? What's the balance between the worrying about the public perceiving you as being gung-ho?
We've had the green light, so I think as long as you're taking every single precaution you can internally for your staff and the way the environment is set up and the processes that you put in place, and the message is clear to your customers, then I think you can deliver that correctly. Certainly there's been a case where there have been instances where people have overstepped the mark or jumped the gun, and that can be damaging, and that's not good for us as an industry. Ultimately, we have the green light, and as long as we're doing it responsibly, I think we should push forward and make that happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think the last thing any of us want to exist in is in a curtain twitching, he said, she said sort of environment where people are being reported for doing this, that, and whatever. And unfortunately, I think that can be a little part of the sort of British way of doing things. Raj, you had your hand up to answer something there in terms of the gung-ho approach that agents, should they worry about their image?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got 2 points on that. So the first is, I think it's not about just doing the right thing, but it's about visibly being seen to do the right thing. So it's not just about what you're doing on a particular viewing, but recognising that most agents out there operate within a local market. They should be seen visibly to be acting responsibly, and whether that means putting a sign up in their window about what they're doing or not doing, visible carrying of PPE and their processes, and making it clear on their website. So the first thing is, I think, doing the right thing, I don't think is a nice to have, it's a must have. So there are clear government guidance around it, and I think getting that wrong and being found to get that wrong will be brand damaging, potentially fatally brand damaging for some. The second part is being shown to do the right thing. But I think the more interesting thing is the government sort of took its foot off the brake on the property market. Lockdown from coronavirus is no longer an unknown. And given that 6 countries have now gone through a period of lockdown and progression, lock up and then lock down again, I would be looking at this as an opportunity to refine the business model in the expectation that we go through various stages of unlock and relock at a regional level, and refining processes and policies to support that. And that means, I think, to the point, not dropping away from virtual viewings perhaps, or even the qualification of applicants that you're dealing with, but taking the best that you can and making it a permanent change to your business model.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Jamie, did you have your hand up there at the beginning of that?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think the reality of it is, we've been let loose, as it were, but as business owners and as an industry, we've all got an obligation to try and get back to normal as quickly as possibly, but as safely as possibly. It's as fundamental as that. The government can't support the industry and the nation for much longer than it's proposing to do. The virus, unfortunately, is something that I think we're going to have to live with as a society for a period in time. And we can't all be holed up at home. We've got to find a path to get back to normal. And if that's a new normal, if we're in the beginning of the opening up quasi-normal stage that we find ourselves in now, whatever it is, each and every one of us as business owners and as an industry holistically, we've got to find a path to get back to normal, because we're going to live with this for a significant period in time. It's as simple as that. The government have given us loose guidelines, but they can't write a plan for each and every industry. There's millions of businesses and 70 million people. We've got our own part to play. Safety of our people, safety of our clients, and let's get back to normal, to quote Mr. Rawlings.
Yeah, I don't think we can all afford to be too wet about this.
No, we can't. It
comes from an old person, really. But anyway. Sorry, Ben, when you've got your hand up, that implies there might be something coming in that we need to answer.
On this, I'll go to the question in a minute, but just in line with what you were saying, Jamie, I think that the one upside to the 2 months of how we've all been dealing with is that I think the world is a convert into jumping onto video calls. So the concept of, going back to normal, I think there should be a place in your workflow, regardless of viruses disappearing or not, as a great opportunity of, I'm a massive believer that you can engage with people so much better if you can see them face to face. And if you have the power of your desktop to start sharing screen and showing people a whole bunch of stuff, rather than waiting for the viewing or the valuation that you're going to do in a week's time, and give all your competition a chance to jump the gun on that. You must build that in. It's not something we're not going to be doing. We're going to be doing this going forward all the time, and it's very powerful.
Now, I like your I like that point of view of the fact that what Raj was talking about the potential for lockdowns coming and going. I think you need to have a strategy, and quite how that's going to engage itself, whether it means having more 360 tools or video content, etc., I think is important. Richard, you're at the bottom of my screen. You had your hand up briefly there, and you've been quite quiet to date. Obviously, I think anyone would like to hear what you've got to say about this.
I mean, I think safety is a given. I agree absolutely with Peter. You've got to be very prescriptive about what you do, but I don't think anybody's suggesting anybody should be gung-ho, but I think the numbers of buyers and applicants over the last sort of 3 or 4 days would indicate that, you know, there's a lot of people out there with an appetite to buy properties, and you know, as businesses, we all need to serve our clients and offer a service. So, you know, whether you choose to keep your brand shut or whether you open it, you need to seize the opportunity now. That would be my thought.
Yeah, no, I think it's. I think that's a very good. I think that's all vital, really. I mean, it'll be very interesting to hear from one or two of the agents in a minute about their sort of final view. But I'm very. We got plenty of time there, so if you've got questions, you know, we've got some more questions to get through here. There's an interesting one coming here from Paige Brown, which opens a sort of wider door, really, which is they're talking about being HMO specialists and struggling to view properties when they're not empty, which is obviously a problem for a lot of people. And they're asking how we'd approach this. I mean, obviously from my business's point of view at Viewber, we've definitely had an issue with trying to define what is safe and what isn't. And obviously we do what our clients ask us to do within reason, and keeping our employees happy. So our problems are exactly the same, I'm sure, as some of the agents' problems. So if you were going to answer that, Kai, in terms of if a property's got somebody in it, how are you approaching that?
Obviously, from an HMO perspective, that's very difficult because obviously the different parties involved, and clearly the difficulties is if that person or persons living in that property doesn't have a vested interest in the outcome, and that's going to be a challenge, and I think that's going to be a challenge for us all of this year. So going back to the processes around if some videos and stuff can be made available at an earlier stage, and we access it from this is an income and lead perspective, we're going to have to create a way of not being able to conduct the level of activity in terms of viewings that was happening pre-COVID, because the government guidelines are just not going to facilitate, you're not going to be able to get to that velocity. So we are going to have to create another process so we can still maintain profitable level of business.
But Kai, I mean, we've always known that if there's, as an estate agent, if there's somebody in a property that doesn't want to let you in, it makes life very difficult anyway. And we know that if there's somebody old, shielding, someone who's actually showing symptoms, of course that makes sense not to show. But I think that for everybody else, you know, is it as straightforward as I mean, what this questioner is asking is, if you can't turn an occupied property into an empty property, which is obviously the ideal, when you're showing a property, you say, look, we're coming round, would you mind leaving the property for half an hour while we're inside it? You've got the usual things, you know, whether the owners insist you wear a mask or whether you have to wipe down the door handle when you leave, etc., etc. For instance, are you suggesting, and you don't necessarily have to engage with this, I think Raj just referred to the brand potential issues with this, which are very important. You know, in the days of social media, if you do something wrong and you get caught doing something wrong, you can really get clobbered for it. So it's very important to not only to do it right, but to be seen to be doing it right, as Raj was saying. What are you doing with your viewing, with your negs when they're out viewing? Are you providing them with masks? Are you asking the owners what they want? How are you doing it?
We're providing full equipment for all staff, but both the incoming viewers and if there are landlords or sellers also at the property, we're sending out a protocol for all parties to agree and acknowledge. That's done via an e-sign process that we then get, so we've got authorisation from all parties, and obviously then the government guidelines in terms of the viewing, 15 minutes, 2 parties from the same household, all has to be adhered to, and that's what they're signing up on from the outset. So I think as long as the communication is clear to show you've made all the precautions you can, you know, most people are reasonable and sensible and will be willing to do what they need to make that happen.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that's going to be the norm. Mark, what are you finding?
Yeah, so like Kai, we don't want to just deal with everybody, so we're trying to screen out people who can't afford it, who just got a bit sick of having a small garden and they may not be interested. So the main thing we're doing is you're only allowed to see a house if you've been through a screening procedure and you've got the money and you're in a reasonably strong position for one reason or another, and you've seen the virtual viewing that we've done for it, and you still feel that you're going to buy it. So so that's taken out maybe a third of our viewings. And then we've gone a bit too far with our PPE sort of stuff. So we've got really sort of high quality stuff. And we're just trying to do exactly what Kai said and just make sure that every single contact we have is communicated very clearly. So we won't arrive anywhere unless it's been signed off, just like Kai. The other thing, just going back to what Ben says, is a very good time to do little video WhatsApps to people and say, yeah, hi there, are you still good? Are you still okay to see me at 10 o'clock for that market appraisal or for this meeting? And actually, because everybody is very used to these Zoom calls now, we're just throwing video everywhere, and the conversion rate has been exceptional. So I think it is a good opportunity to go in before the market appraisal, even before we have 3 types of market appraisal, for example. So one is just virtual because the person is concerned or they're maybe not that serious. The second one is a Zoom call, and then they exit the house, we go around the house with full protection. And the third one is we go in the house because they want to actually converse with us, and we sit in the garden and just keep way away, and we limit that to 15 minutes and then we leave.
So what do you call PPE? Are you talking hazmat suits? Are you talking masks?
Well, I'm talking masks, sanitizer, yeah. So just get that clarified. Really good quality masks, not just the cheapest masks we can get. But we're just like Peter Knight said, it's safety first. So I've got staff who have got parents, if they got COVID, that may not survive this, So it is very well going flying into this, but your staff have got parents and they're concerned and they're worried about safety. We want to get our businesses off the ground. But if you do what Peter Knight says and put safety first, you'll get a win-win out of this, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure we've all started going out in public, and there's no doubt about it. It does feel a bit weird walking down the street. People are sort of looking at you as if you've grown 3 heads, and they're suddenly sort of crossing the street to avoid you. And is it me, or it's definitely a slightly different feel. And I think most people, that would be the sensible answer. It's common sense. Your workers, if they've got grandparents or parents that they're saying that are elderly or old or in a risk group or whatever it is, they won't see them. I haven't seen my father for 3 months. I probably won't see my father for another 6 months. But that doesn't mean I can't keep in touch. And it's just, it comes to common sense. Ian, hazmat suits or masks?
Masks for me would be my way forward, and the best quality you can get your hands on. But I think in terms of this question about the possible damage to a brand versus, getting on with life, I think as long as you follow the sensible processes that have been talked about by Kai, Mark, Peter, in terms of, imagining it was your grandparent, if there is brand, we cannot live our life worrying about not doing things through fear of criticism. As long as we do them well, and we do them sensibly, and we do them intelligently, and we do them as if it was your grandmother. And I love Kai's idea of getting back the e-signature to get everybody to confirm the processes of what they need to turn up. And I presume he's empowered his people to refuse the viewing if the client turns up incorrectly prepped. I think as long as we genuinely adopt sensible processes to maintain the safest possible way of doing this, and not ask staff who maybe have vulnerable people at home to take part in that risk, and that we're intelligent with who we get to do it, how we get them to do it. I think constantly worrying about what somebody else might think paralyzes any business, let alone a estate agency. I think you've got to build your processes, stand behind them, tell people what you're doing confidently and why, and do them. And if there's the odd dissenting or the odd person that wants to snigger behind your back or put something on social media, so be it. Be it.
I do wonder whether this is one of those times where some of the younger companies out there will grab the initiative and be a bit more nimble and able to move.
But a couple of comments.
Okay.
Just on that. Sorry, go on.
Okay, well, no, go ahead, Ben. Let's hear them.
No, I was just going to say, in line with this sort of general thinking, Kev Shaw on Facebook Live says, in my local market, I've already seen a good 40 to 50% of agents ignoring the government guidelines and staffing offices as before. If this percentage rises, there will be a pressure to follow as the applicants will start to expect this of agents. What's the advice of the panel?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a sort of leadership question, isn't it? Come on, Peter, you're a well-known leader, Peter Rollings. What would you tell your staff in that situation? You can't hide there for too long, mate.
Well, I don't know. I mean, frankly, in most agencies I've ever been to, people are 6 foot apart anyway. They weren't in any of mine, but in most they're spread out. I mean, the thought of putting up perspex screens between all the agents fills me with horror, and I think it's totally inappropriate and massively over the top. But if someone comes to the door and makes an appointment with the agent, and there are 3-4 people in, 6 foot apart, and comes into the office and they're 6 foot apart, I honestly can't see an issue with that. And I think, you know, to Ian's point, you can't please everyone all the time, so don't try.
Well, I rather agree with that. Jamie, I'm sure you'll have a trenchant view on this.
Well, it's just, you know, as Peter's offices, as lovely as they were and as widely spaced as they were outside of the M25, and I've been in thousands of estate agency offices, it's a challenge to restaff as the previous layout pre-COVID. A lot of branches are side by side, and a lot of people that watch this or listen to this will have to take some action to use the perspex to look at who's working from the office and their internal processes. Perhaps the office is just a closed office. They have some prior appointment or capability, but the field-based staff who go out and see clients just base themselves from home, so that mitigates the risk of those office-based staff. But you know, my point was, there will be challenges the length and breadth of the country, because a lot of estate agency offices are small and tight and compact, where the social distancing issue will be a real issue.
Yeah. I mean, Peter Knight, people pay a fortune for your advice on this. I mean, if you had a, so let's give them some for free here. If it was a difference between doing the business and worrying about your brand, and you were advising an agent, could they, if not say should, could they go for it and not risk it, or do you think the risk to local brand damage is too valuable to miss?
Well, I think this is an opportunity to build your reputation for doing the right thing. And I think that I think some firms are going to be judged. I'm not going to mention any names, but there are some firms that have been completely cavalier and totally disrespectful to the situation. And whilst I take the points about let's get on with it, and I'm in that school, but let's get on with it properly, and let's do the right thing. And therefore, I would put my brand right at the top of after safety in terms of what reputational damage could be caused by being inappropriate. But if you follow protocols, the first thing you've got to do, I think, for every business is say, how are we going to do it? Get that document. This is the way we're going to do it at our firm. This is it. Communicate that to all the customers, has already been said. I love the idea of getting it signed off first electronically. I think that's a brilliant idea in terms of that. And just then make sure that you are implementing it appropriately. I don't see an issue then. In fact, actually, if you get focused on the right customers and take control, as I was saying earlier, I actually think you can do more business, as opposed to having 20, 30, 40 viewings on a property, which is crazy. It's crazy before, it's even more crazy now. Instead, get really focused around this discipline. You've got to view the property virtually. I want to have a conversation with you about it. I'm going to highlight some of the downsides. One of my members just this morning said to me that she's based in London, and she said that for lettings now, they're actually asking tenants to view it virtually, and then saying to them, and what sort of offer do you think that you would be making if the property is suitable, having viewed it? Because she wants to identify whether they're wasters or not and going to go in with something stupid in terms of an offer. And if they come back with a stupid price, she won't let them into the property. And she's also having a similar conversation with some of her landlords, where they've got a massive oversupply at the moment because of the student situation and the Airbnb withdrawal. So they've got a massive oversupply. And so she's saying to landlords, and what price would you take And if they're unrealistic, she said, well, there's no point in even showing somebody around the property because they're just not going to pay it because there are these other options that they can have available. So I think this is a great chance for us to do the right thing and to get back to being estate agents again.
There's a sort of Minority Report sort of point to this, which is that in the old days we used to train all our staff to halfway through reviewing, they'd say, well, what do you think this is worth? And they'd say what they thought it was worth and then say, is that an offer? You're now talking about that taking one stage further before they even go in, saying, well, what do you think it's worth? Oh, great, is that an offer? Can we start from there?
Well, I think
Love it.
It's all, you know, let's face it, with the communications that are available, you know, I've been a part of the ICG now for a few months, and I don't know all of the firms, but I've seen a large number of the firms that are members of the ICG, and there's some incredible technology and service providers that are a part of it. And quite frankly, you know, with all of those facilities, somebody should be able to be pretty well, you know, able to make an assessment as to whether this property is largely right or not. And therefore, if we do this properly, and we say to tenants and we say to buyers, you've got to go through this process, and then say, based on what you've seen so far, what do you think you would be interested at? What price point would you be interested? And let's have that conversation.
I think it absolutely helps facilitate the discussion. I'm going to ask Raj, you haven't got your hand up, but you've spent a lot of time building a fabulous brand. Brand or go for it? Which is, if you had a balance in each hand, what would you do?
I don't think that there is a trade-off to be made. So speaking for how I look at the agency markets, I think the driver now is working out how to operate effectively and safely. And I think that you can't compromise on either of those things. And only by operating effectively and safely will you be able to underpin and grow your brand. So it's not an either or, it's a must-have in both columns.
Yeah.
Sorry for reframing the question.
No. I think it's just that we all know that the problem with the estate agency, or one of the many problems with the estate agency industry, it's a great industry to be in, but it is pretty unregulated. And it is one of the issues that you can find yourself in a situation where a couple of cowboys can really ruin the entire feel. And if they give the local market the wrong impression, you know, you've only got to walk past on your way to get your coffee on the way to work a couple of mornings and see an agency stuffed full of people. And, you know, Peter alluded just then to some agents who haven't necessarily been giving the industry the best name during lockdown and coming out of it. And I think it's really important. Ben, are there more comments, or do you have something to say? It's lovely to hear the technological genius still on mute, because it's your business.
Unmute yourself.
There we go.
I was pressing the space bar. It let me down on that occasion. D. Quealy of Quealy & Co. said, do you think that the large corporates will find it difficult to react to local demands?
Ian, you've got great experience in this area, so what do you think?
In the general, I think the answer is yes, because I just generally don't think they hold the same caliber of people inside their companies as maybe some of the smaller local independent businesses. But most importantly, I do not believe the chain of command or the leadership the vision doesn't come down properly. So I think you'll have a load of leaderless, rudderless.
Well, it's very interesting, Ian, because there's been some rumours, obviously, about one of the largest agency groups going down a significant number of offices and changing their model. Connell sent out their thing yesterday saying they're all going back to work, I think, on Wednesday this week. You've had the countrywide thing that Peter Rollins was alluding to earlier. I mean, you would have thought that some of the corporates would have the option of being able to buy in all the stuff one requires in terms of PPE, centralised training, etc., etc. The flip side, I think, for a lot of the corporates has been that perhaps they in the past, perhaps overly relied on the income deriving from the buyer. And in this particular, at a time like this, I think it becomes more and more difficult to do that. I don't know, maybe Richard, maybe you feel that by taking the work away from the agents while they're going along with the process, they can concentrate more. Do you think the corporate should be relying more on automation and concentrating on the buyer to make money from referrals and things? What do you think?
Yeah, potentially yes, but you know, just coming back to the previous point, I was on a webinar with Peter Knight, probably week 1 or week 2 of COVID, and there was a conversation about how people behave in this during this period will be remembered. I think it's really true. So be it suppliers who've turned off direct debits, or I think reputationally, people will remember how businesses have behaved during this time, and they will remember. But I mean, coming back to your point, it's not for me to say what businesses should do. I mean, I did some work with the legend that is Simon Whale in terms of outsourcing just in general. And a lot of businesses don't do it, but the sentiment was sort of moving forward that more businesses will. I mean, the corporates traditionally have done things like sales progression in-house. It's going to be interesting how they see that moving forward, whether these people will come back post-furlough, but I haven't got a crystal ball, I don't know. But I mean, clearly outsourcing and some of the tech that has come to light during this time should be utilised by agents. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Well, I very much hope that people who are watching this will recognise, I think they've heard about the ICG, and I really hope that people who are listening understand what this is all about. It's about trying to give all of you guys out there as agents best-in-class tech solutions. You don't have to use any of them, or you can use one or two of them or whatever, but as everyone thinks to themselves, what on earth do we do next? This has obviously got to be a part of that. We've got about 4 or 5 minutes left, so we want to keep this to the hour. I mean, Jamie, you and your business come into contact with hundreds, if not thousands, of different agents. I want to come back to that sort of brand versus gung-ho sort of conversation and what you're seeing out there. Are you seeing your clients? Because Richard just mentioned it. People will not necessarily remember what you did wrong, but they'll remember how it made them feel. That's always the way it is. Those feelings stay with people for a very long time. What are you seeing with your customers? And I'm not talking about this being, as I rather unfairly intimated to Raj, that it's a one or the other, clearly. But there are going to be some people out there who are going to be a bit more gung-ho. Are you seeing that at all amongst any of your partners?
Yeah, I mean, we've got a real mixed bag. So 2 large corporates, one which is a PLC, right down to mom and pop individuals and franchisees. So there has been a really mixed bag in terms of how people have reacted initially. We had viewings that were being uploaded on the system through the early stages of the process, whenever most people felt that the guidance said not to do that. So we've had a real mixed bag. We are seeing the corporates coming back on quite quickly, but someone mentioned the PPE piece earlier, the buying power that they have. Obviously they can move quickly to get all of the relevant kit in. Some of the smaller independents, a lot of them are operational, but working towards business as usual in June, as opposed to up and running now. So if you think about the smaller businesses, they're family owned, their name is their brand, it is them, and they're many hats they wear in their normal day-to-day life, and now it's becoming a COVID office specialist, and getting all the safety and precautions in line with their people. So I think the simple answer is a mixed bag. From our perspective, we locked down 2 weeks beforehand for the safety of our people, and for us it's all been about communicating exactly what we're doing at every point to them, and also to our industry, to our network. So we did a lot in terms of communication to our partners, letting them know what we're up to, letting them know what we can help them with. There wasn't that much of an uptake because so many took so much advantage of furlough and just battened down the hatches and looked at inward protection rather than outward growth, which is understandable. But we're now starting to see significant differences in how people are coming back online at the rate at which they're doing it, which is interesting. Well, I don't think we'll see business as usual for a good few weeks yet.
I think it would be very interesting to reconvene really and have this conversation again in about a month's time. Ian, again, because your view is across, or you're in contact with so many different people, you had a view on this?
Just going back to the original conversation, I don't think it is brand or gung-ho. I think you can still move forward and move your brand forward. I don't think having a policy of sensibly getting back to work, adopting all the relevant safety procedures that should be in place is ultimately going to damage your brand. I'm just saying I don't think you should fear doing that because of the opinions of one or two people. As long as you're doing it with your hand on your heart, with safety first, I see no degradation. But like Jamie, I am seeing a huge differentiation between how people are interpreting what's right, what's wrong, what's correct, a massive difference. Some are literally Well, I know of one business where somebody I know very, very well returned to work. No PPF in place, no procedures for viewings, just literally was told to turn up to work. You know, that's the wrong way to do it, because they didn't know whether to show people around. The person who was supposed to be leading them wasn't actually there, wasn't contactable. You know, and ultimately that clearly is the wrong way to do it and isn't very good for our industry as a reputation. But
I think that's fair enough. I think that's fair enough. Ian, I'm gonna draw it to a close because we're coming up to 1 o'clock and we want to keep it to an hour. I think that's what we'd like to do. I think that if people have any serious questions, please do go to the ICG website and ask the questions. I mean, I think it's fair to say that the government is not going to give us a blueprint that leads us out of this. Everyone has to take that. We can't just sit back and wait for the government to say, oh, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. You know, we have to be responsible for ourselves and use common sense. But I really hope that for those of you who've been listening to this and those of you who are watching it on recordings, you'll see the hundreds of years of experience around you here in terms of the people who are talking to you, and the hundreds of years of that experience that's been put into trying to develop some solutions for you guys that make sense. You know, it's potentially going to revolutionize the way you do business, the way you make money, and hopefully make you more money. So the best of luck to all of you. I really wish you the best coming out of this, and keep in touch with anybody here that you want to. We're all relatively easily contactable. And just before we go, Ben, any comments you wanted to make?
The prompt on the next week's webinar is an Ask Us Anything. So, you know, we'd really like everyone to really pile in some questions so that we can just be answering what everyone's after for next time round.
Okay, good stuff. Well, look, many thanks to the some grey hair, some not so grey haired people sitting around here. Thank you very much for your time, guys. I hope you've enjoyed it, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks very much.